Hello, Wilderness Labs community. My name is Brendan, and I'm excited to tell you the story of how the enterprise class IoT stack that Wilderness has developed and the Wilderness Labs Impact Program are pulling my startup venture, Project Green, back from what seemed at the time like the brink of failure. A story of how a little $6 magnetometer with some Velcro is on the verge of changing things in a big way for Project Green and the community where I live. But before I get to that, I want to talk about the two main ways that I think a platform and development tool set like the one Wilderness has developed represents a game changer. First, it really has delivered on the promise that I, as a .NET developer with no real knowledge of circuitry and no previous experience with hardware design or writing firmware, can leverage my existing skills to not only prove a concept, but to then build out a functional IoT prototype that works and is ready to scale. So, Meadow makes IoT accessible. To put Meadow to work for Project Green, I didn't even need to go through the process or the effort of learning how to fully assemble a breadboard. I got a breadboard as part of the Wilderness Hack Kit I ordered. And being a complete hardware noob, found myself zooming into images on Hackster, trying to mimic and overlay those samples onto my board in an effort to get a magnetometer, display, and push button all hooked up to my F7. But quicker than I could assemble all the wires, and quicker than I could even decipher the little paper labels on the resistors that come in the box, Wilderness revealed that they had read my mind and were at least one step ahead of my struggle with the release of the Project Lab board, which allowed me to put the breadboard aside in favor of what was about the 10 minutes it took to unbox the Project Lab board, plug in my magnetometer to it, connect it all to my laptop via USB, crack open Visual Studio, and begin coding. It was that simple for somebody without a hardware background. So, second big way a platform like this changes the game is that it's not only accessible, but it's also truly enterprise class. A buzzword used in different ways across different technologies and tools, I know. So when I use it in reference to what the Wilderness Stack does for Project Green, I mean that the platform represents a readily available, turnkey, scalable foundation layer that inherently and from its inception makes the solution I create and stack on top of it a reliable, scalable, and secure one. A stark contrast to the pile of botched Arduino prototypes on the desk next to me that represent the flirt with failure I mentioned Project Green had when I decided to contract a very experienced electrical engineer and embedded developer to roll my own reliable and scalable foundational platform for the entire Project Green IoT device set I envisioned, which didn't work. It was costly, took a long time, and by the end was much more painful than I think it should have been. Just to unpack that a bit, after 3 years of grinding and burning through all the funds I had bootstrapped from savings and my 401k, and spending all the grant funds I had chased down to finally manufacture a batch of field prototypes and get them installed in the homes of beta testers, the devices failed. All the devices failed, actually. And within the first week of what was supposed to be a 12-month-long beta test period with volunteer participants. We, of course, tried over the course of the first few months to salvage the hardware with some firmware reworks by soldering and aftermarket circuit, reboot circuit to the bottom of the board, a few other things I never quite understood the intent behind, to be honest, but never got the issues sorted before the pandemic hit. And beta testers, very understandably, weren't all that keen on my stopping by to wrench on the electronic board hooked to the water meter in their basement. I didn't want COVID either, and I certainly didn't want Project Green to become some super spreader event. So things hit a dead end. And the coffers and my morale were drained. So I took some time to lick my wounds and do a post-mortem to try to figure out, big picture, what went wrong. And to try to flesh out whether there was a way for me to continue my passion project in consideration of all the things that went wrong, and whether those things can be done differently. While also now just trying to find some sleep between changing our new baby's diapers and working the day job to do my half of keeping a roof over Luke and Aubrey's heads, or all four of our heads. That post-mortem ultimately led me to realize and reconcile myself to three things. First, having a baby during a global pandemic is not fun, and you should find a different time. Second, and also more specific to Project Green, I didn't have it in me to try and build a hardware and firmware stack from what to me was the ground up again. Maybe something that wasn't all that realistic from the get-go, at least not in my circumstance, nor could I use a design born embedded solely in one person's brain, right? Even if it was a big, experienced brain like that of the gentleman I'd hired. And then third, and related to the last one, but more specific to personal frustrations and about the locus of control I had with regard to where I wanted to take Project Green. I couldn't let the tech stack that was to sit at the heart of this social enterprise I was building and was to serve as a revenue stream to fund the company's greater mission to help people be developed in a language and on an older stack that was just adjacent to but lower level than the one I had 20 plus years of personal experience and success with. It was just out of reach. I didn't have enough first-hand knowledge with the Phase 1 stack, and so I didn't see and thereby couldn't avoid a solution around the pitfalls, which was really frustrating because I had a skill set and experience that I could have used to solve the problem myself if things were a little more modern, one level of abstraction higher, and maybe a bit more turnkey on the hardware and driver side of things. So then, as people do when looking for the answers to dead ends in life, I went to Google and typed in .NET and embedded firmware design or something like that. And up popped this Meadow thingy made by a company named Wilderness Labs, along with some other less convincing search results. And for some time thereafter, I continued the internet search for alternative IoT stacks that were in my wheelhouse as a developer, in between diaper changes and hampered by the sleep deprivation brought on by having a new baby on board, which is why it took some time. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think IoT startup is like third rung down maybe. Eventually, my amazing better half Amanda somehow sleep trained the baby, and I found some time to dust off my internet search. And once again, all the really viable links containing what I thought might be something I could use to resuscitate my passion project href'd back to Wilderness Labs web pages, press releases, and sample projects. So I emailed hello@wildernesslabs.co with a quick little intro to my startup, and description of what I was trying to build an IoT device to do. I had a patent pending status protection, so I just wanted to see if I could get a response from someone who could tell me if they also thought the stack was a good fit for Project Green. And instead of a call or an email back from a sales rep like I kind of expected, I got an email from a guy named Brian, who turned out to be the CEO of the company. He took the time to video call with me, and after about 5 minutes of him asking some follow-up questions about my requirements, he told me that Meadow could pretty easily get the job done, and affirmed my hunch that all I really needed to get something fully functioning was a hack kit and magnetometer. I already mentioned that I ordered the hack kit, which then gave way to the project lab board. Fast forward to when I started quickly working up some basic code leveraging the Meadow.Foundation libraries that already contained the drivers for the same magnetometer I had already proofed on the Arduino platform. And just like that, I began getting readings from the meter over the Meadow, similar to what I saw when tethered to the Arduino, now paperweights. And I was pretty darn excited and relieved, and found myself really wishing I had met Meadow before Arduino back in the days of funding. Because it was just as easy as Brian said it would be, and I had a proof of concept device again, but one that this time I could code on and add components to myself without completely destabilizing the foundation. Which set me on the path of exploring ways to try to get back to a functional field prototype and prototype device set beta test, with the coffers now empty. And then, sure enough, wilderness, always seemingly at least one step ahead of my need, yet again, somehow, and this time in a different way, announced this thing called the Impact Program for people and companies with ideas to use IT to basically help improve the world. My words. I applied, and Project Green was awarded the sponsorship to get the field prototype. And now, at pretty much ludicrous speed, Spaceballs reference, not the rapper. I don't know how fast he runs. He drives real fast and furious, though. Anyway, at ludicrous speed, especially relative to my Arduino experience, I am holding and actively refining the logic and data persistence layers of my Meadow app, running on a core compute module atop a custom Project Green tailored PCB design, thanks to the Impact Program. It's not going blue in the face like my Arduino stack, and that magnetometer and Velcro are doing their thing, which, for context, is a concept that I originally proved with my iPhone and electrical tape, using a utility pump to simulate a water main since I lived in an apartment and didn't have access to the closet that contained my unit's meter, so this is on top of my counter. You can see how the Compass app on the phone is picking up the magnetic field fluctuations emitted by the nutating disk inside the meter. A positive displacement meter, just like this one, in my hand, and that is the most common type of water meter in homes out west where I live. The disk moves and nutates when a fixed known volume of water passes through the chamber, essentially rotating a magnet at the top of the meter, which traditionally was designed to drive a mechanical dial that sits on top of the meter, kind of like so, and has to be manually read. By velcroing a magnetometer tethered to the meter this side of it, it's quickly and cost effectively retrofitted to become a connected thing that relays sensor data to the cloud in real time, where it can be aggregated and made useful to folks. Now, digitizing the signal and keeping an overall pulse count on an electric board is nothing new. In fact, most water delivery authorities haven't read these things with the naked eye for some time. They use automated meter reading systems that consist of some form of a PCB tethered to the meter via wire that keeps simple count of the gallons used, which is then in turn read and logged to a database once a month via an antenna attached to a truck that drives around the neighborhood. Not exactly real time, and thereby not all that helpful to homeowners in terms of identifying leaks in time to prevent waste, and certainly not all that helpful to folks who want to adhere to a targeted water budget and need info all throughout the month to do so, whether it's their personal desire to conserve or whether it's pushed on them in some form or another by their water district, especially in times of drought and shortage. There's also nothing in that basic AMR functionality I described that breaks out and summarizes your consumption by fixture type, being toilets, sinks, showers, lawn sprinklers, clothes washers, dishwashers, ice makers, everything in and around your home, which is the real novel part of this. By using Meadow and the magnetometer velcroed to the outside of the meter, the Project Green water monitor relays data detailing the timing and fine-grained fluctuations in the magnetic pulses emitted by the meter in cadence over time to the cloud, where it's compared to water event fingerprints captured during device setup, resulting in the tagging of water events with the exact water fixture type, or in many cases, even the exact water fixture responsible for the water events. During the first week of the Arduino beta test, before things failed, the algorithm running behind the device was able to distinguish between the flushes of two toilets of the same make and model in the same home. Something we had seen in previous lab test results too. A bit of proprietary voodoo in there, but pretty basic stuff, to be honest. So, what do you do with a water meter that's been quickly and non-invasively retrofitted to become a connected thing that monitors and reports on water use in real time? Well, if you're Project Green, you use it as a vehicle to capture people's attention and engage them in a conversation about the very real and mounting water crisis in the western region of the United States where I live. A significant gap between the supply and demand for water across the entire region is projected to emerge by the year 2030, a situation that experts have aptly termed a crisis, given that the interconnected challenges it brings with it will be economic, environmental, and social. Also because there are two main contributors to the growing gap between supply and demand. The first and the most obvious is that demand has increased with an overshot in development and population out west here, in places like California, Arizona, and Colorado, where I live. The second, and the real curveball, at least in my opinion, the sleeper that a lot of people don't really realize, is that there is a cyclical weather pattern here out west. Not an annual one or short one we've seen both the start and the finish to in recordable times, but instead a cycle spanning hundreds and hundreds of years with subcycles. The upcoming one of which is forecasted to be marked by mega droughts across the entire region. So not just part of one state or a single state, but multiple states at the same time. Droughts that some paleoclimatologists predict could span 10, 15, or even 20 years. At least that's what the lake beds and trees tell us happened in the past. and may indeed be why some of the pretty hardy and lean living ancient peoples that resided in this region migrated out or seemingly and otherwise disappeared. Even a few really wet years like the one we've seen in parts of the region this year, with all the reservoirs filling up again and all that excitement, that's not going to be enough to make a material dent in the shortage. The crisis is coming. So basically, we built up all these great metropolises and farms here in the West during, call it, the wettest 100 years or so, in a cyclical weather pattern that spans 6, 7, 800 years. So it seems leaner times are ahead, and we aren't exactly set up for lean living, which really sunk in for me after reading the bits of paleoclimatology I just mentioned, and then doing more research, reading more books, attending local water board meetings to see what their plans were, plugging into a few other channels with the Fed and some funding initiatives, and just kind of tracking the crisis. A situation that I really don't think is common knowledge, nor is the extent to which it will ripple out from the region to just about everyone in the country in the way of food prices, energy shortages, and more, which inspired me to start Project Green, to try to do 3 things. First, to help educate people about the developing situation. Second, to empower people to reduce water waste and curtail their personal consumption through the use of technology, when and as necessary in the face of these rising costs and water restrictions. And third, to try to bring people together as a community to share and collaborate, not only working together to reduce water waste and curtail their usage, but more importantly, to stay on top of decisions and conversations as they ramp up at local, state, and federal levels, as government and water delivery authorities, probably along with large teams of attorneys, come together to try to decide how to go about prioritizing food supply, hydroelectric energy supply, ecological concerns, as well as some of the luxuries we enjoy today in the West, like nice green lawns and golf courses, and big old casino towns in the middle of the desert. So while government and water delivery authorities would be wise to quickly pivot to invest in better ways, to empower end consumers to participate in the conversation and to participate in demand-side management efforts in a way that puts them more in control and is equitable, or at least fair, I'm not sure they have the political pull and alignment or the time or bandwidth to come up with a solid solution. And so the onus most likely falls to other people who can do something about it. Maybe people like me. And thanks to Wilderness, and circling back now, while I suppose it might sound kind of trite to some, Wilderness and the Wilderness Stack have put Project Green in a much better position to try to do something to bring people together in the face of the coming challenges, and to hopefully contribute to efforts to preserve the quality of life we enjoy here out west for my kids' generation, and maybe those to come thereafter. I can't say enough about this stack and the company behind it. My experience with the company via the Impact Program has shown me that Wilderness really does genuinely want to empower people to build cool, helpful things. And I think they've done just that, and are in an amazing position to scale that out to empower tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of .NET developers and others to start building things to solve problems and to do things that are important to them. So, thank you for your time and for listening to my story. If you want to follow Project Green, help, or reach out, hop on over to projgreen.com. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.